So I've been thinking a lot about the issues that divide this country, and it was very helpful to hear a bit of a children's BBC yesterday about the how Marshall Rosenberg, yeah, uh, worked with NBC, how he just used those methods and how helpful they are. And when I look at my habits, I can very easily talk for a long time about what's wrong and point the finger and, da da da. And I do that a lot and have done that a lot in my life. And it's not productive, doesn't do much, makes my mind not so peaceful, not contented. And that's because I'm talking from my head and not my heart. My view is very narrow. And I'm really separating myself from humanity. And I think my practice, especially during this divided time, but really all the time, is to approach people with a fresh mind. It's so easy to categorize people based on looks or any superficial anything. And then I start looking for the characteristics that I've imputed on that particular category of person. Again, separating myself. And I think we've all been conditioned to do this. I'm quite good at it. And this ends any connection, whether I'm in front of the person or just thinking about certain people. It's quite a dead end. When I think about my 35 years as a nurse, I was trained to look at every person with a fresh mind. One of my instructors used to say, leave your judgments at the door. You have no idea what this person has experienced. And that was very helpful advice. It really freed me up to focus on how I could help. And I think that kind of practice is needed now. So instead of scanning for differences, we train ourselves to scan for the similarities in real time with the person in front of us. It's having the motivation to connect to a person in front of me. And this takes courage. I have an example of that from when I was in school. And I was doing my community health practicum, and a group of us were assigned to a large homeless center in downtown Seattle. We were to go there in early evening because they're open, of course, early evening until the next morning. And so 3 of us went together, and we didn't really know where it was, but we were told that it was down an alley. So we started walking down this long alley in downtown Seattle, and the alley was strewn with many people, mostly men, who were, just sitting around and smoking, talking, many drinking. It wasn't a very comfortable situation. I was quite pretty young then, and my mind was just going off with, I'm not going to get out of this alley alive, and, so all the things you do. And so we were having trouble finding this shelter, and so one of the women that I was with, there were 3 of us, one of them that I was with, there were 2 guys sitting on the ground up against a building, and she walked over to them, and she kneeled down so that she was at their face level and quite close, and said, "Can you help us?" And I will never forget the look on that guy's face, the one that especially answered her. He was so gracious and so happy to be able to help somebody. And he said, "Oh, of course, I know where that is. I stay there." He said, "Come on." And he takes us and shows us where it was. And I was just astounded at both of them, really. This woman, this nurse that had no fear, walked right up to him with fresh mind and asked for what she needed, and he responded to that and helped her and helped us all find where we needed to go. So that was quite a helpful experience that I had, I will say. And just a really beautiful example of connection. So how I categorize a person sets the stage for what unfolds and how it unfolds. I have another experience that I had last year that was similar to this and quite powerful. And it taught me I can approach people with a fresh mind and have a really beneficial connection. So I was in the Spokane airport waiting for the shuttle bus to take me back here to the Abbey. And it was a nice day, and so I was sitting outside, and I was sitting on one of the, cement benches. And there was another bench close to me, and on that bench was a man who was dressed with a cowboy hat and cowboy boots. And he was about my age. And he was looking at me, so I smiled at him. And he asked, "What are you?" And I said, "Well, I'm a Buddhist nun." And then he asked, "Do you believe in our Savior, Jesus Christ?" And I said, "No, I don't." And he said, "Then you will burn in hell." And I was a little shocked, needless to say. And, I had a strong reaction, and, I felt anger and, all the justifying mind and how dare you and all that started coming up. But what popped into my mind was a remembrance about my grandmother, who was a very devout Christian. She was a very loving person, and she worried about people who didn't believe in God and Jesus and that would end up in hell. And she prayed every day for people that didn't believe. And so it just came into my mind that maybe this man was also pained to think that I would go to hell because of my beliefs. So that thought just helped to open my perspective some. So I didn't respond to what he said at all. Instead, I started talking about the similarities between us. And this I took from His Holiness, because that's what he always talks about doing. And I said, all the world religions believe in ethics, love, compassion, and generosity. And as I said that, I saw his face relax. And then he nodded. And then he just started asking me, "Well, where do you live?" And da-da-da. And I asked him, "Where do you live?" And he said he was coming to visit his brother in Spokane, and he lived in Texas. And then at that point, then his brother and sister-in-law drove up, and he said, "Oh, and there they are." And he said, "You have a good day now." And he left. And I felt like that was such a beautiful moment because, needless to say, he would be living a very different life than mine. But we were able to connect on some similar core values. And it was because I didn't separate myself from what he said. I stayed with it. And it was scary for me, I will say, because I didn't know what he was going to do. But that thought of my grandmother came into my mind. And then I was able to, kind of go forward in that way. So I think to heal the divisions in our world right now, the practice is one person at a time. It's the person that's in front of me now. It's not talking about other people, searching for differences. Whether I talk with a person or not, I can train myself to identify how we're similar, how we're connected. The basic connection is always there. And if I really believe that all living beings want happiness and don't want suffering, then I really don't need to complicate things with descriptions and identities and judgments. We can live our lives in very different ways, but connecting with love and compassion and ethics will always be beneficial. and I think recognized. So maybe we can think about one person at a time, practice seeing the person in front of us with a fresh mind so that we can connect with them. And if even just some of us do that, it's going to make such a huge difference in this world, huge difference.